Hi everyone and welcome back to the Whippy. I've just come back from a fantastic event organized by Sony Australia in Sydney where they invited some amazing photographers and YouTubers from all over the country. I enjoyed my time there a lot and it was great to meet so many new awesome photographers and content creators. But of course, we weren't there to just mingle. The main reason for the event was that we could try out any Sony gear we wanted pretty much, but in particular we were there to play around with the new Sony Alpha 9 Mark III. A fantastic sports and peak action camera with up to 120 frames per second, full 14-bit RAW, great pre-capture options, and also of course the global shutter. The biggest challenge for me on that day was not actually using the new gear or setting up the camera for sports photography, because in the end you can only set up a camera in so many ways, and setting up a camera for birds photography and action photography is actually not that dissimilar. So setting up the camera was not a challenge, but what I always find a big challenge is when you shoot a new genre of photography, because you have to retrain your eyes to see the right angles and to put your subjects in the best possible light. So in the end, nothing beats experience. And since I don't have a lot of experience shooting sport, it was definitely a challenge throughout the day, but I think I got some images and videos in the end I was quite happy with. It was definitely a fantastic learning experience, and I could always recommend to everyone to just sometimes get out of your comfort zone, shoot something that you're completely unfamiliar with, because it might give you new angles and ideas for your own photography that you kind of do day to day. Sony had organized an action-packed day for us that started off at the Sydney Swans headquarters, where we got a little introduction to the A9 Mark III in the best settings, and then everyone could pick the gear that they wanted to use throughout the day. I picked an A9 Mark III, the new 2.8 300mm lens, a 70 to 200mm lens, and a 24 to 70mm lens, which I thought should cover me throughout the day. Once we picked out our gear, my group headed over to a nearby golf course to photograph some people hitting some balls and also getting some cool bunker shots. Golf in particular is one of those moments where the global shutter really shines, because with all rolling shutters you basically get a little bit of a bend or curve when people are swinging the golf clubs, whereas with the global shutter all the golf clubs are nice and straight. So it was good to see the global shutter work so well straight away. During the start of the golf session, I mainly focused on getting some nice detailed shots of the club hitting the ball, and I got this 4K slow motion video that I was super happy with. After that, we moved on to another location to get some cool shots from the bunkers with the sand coming up. From there, we moved on to photograph cheerleaders doing amazing acrobats high up in the air. And this was probably the most fun, but also the most challenging shoot for me, because it wasn't so easy to find the perfect angles in this big arena. And here's an image from someone standing right next to me, Krusty Baker, who got this awesome shot of the girl flying up in the air against the Sydney sign. And this was one of those areas where I didn't see this angle while I was standing there, and afterwards I was a little bit annoyed that I didn't see it. I still got some images that I thought were pretty cool, but I didn't quite get a shot that I was super stoked with. So this is one of those areas that I mentioned that with more experience you'll definitely see some better angles as well. After lunch, it was time to head down to Bondi Beach, where we were photographing triathletes running in and out of the water, beach rollerball, and also skateboarding. And I must say, skateboarding was probably the highlight of my day, with so much peak action basically right in your face, with sometimes the board almost coming a bit too close, but most of the time it was just super enjoyable and a real challenge for the camera as well, trying to keep that autofocus on the person at all times while they were jumping wildly through the air. I'm going to get an A9 Mark III and some other Sony gear over the next few weeks and months so I can do some proper reviews and test it for my kind of photography, but for now I must say I was very impressed with the A9 Mark III and how it worked in the field. Of course, a little disclaimer here, I'm still not super stoked about 24 megapixels, but all the features on the camera are simply amazing. And in particular, what stood out to me is the amazing speed booster button on the front of the camera. Or you can also assign it to the buttons on the lens. So whenever you press the button and hold it down, the camera will shoot at 120 frames per second full RAW until your buffer is filled, which is not too long, usually just 1 to 2 seconds, but that's usually enough to capture that peak moment of action. And this is what I really loved. With that button, you almost have to call it the cheat button. You basically almost never miss the moment again when it comes to high action photography. For instance, when we were shooting the close-up of the golf, I tried to hit the moment where the golf club hits the ball. And even at 120 frames per second, I still needed a few attempts before I actually hit that exact moment. But with a normal camera that shoots 20 or 30 or even less frames per second, this would almost be impossible to capture that exact moment. Whereas at 120 frames per second, you can get the skateboarder up in the air doing a few different poses, or you can get the golf club right in the perfect spot, or you can get the girls spinning around up in the air and capturing that perfect moment. Having the ability to just press one button, hold it down, shoot a super high frames per second sequence, and then go back to your normal frames per second was truly amazing and basically allows you to never miss these crucial action moments in the field. So this is something that I would love to see on a lot more cameras, and super well done, Sony. The other thing that almost shocked me was how good image stabilization with the A9 Mark III and the 2.8 300mm lens and some other lenses was. In the past, one of my main criticisms for Sony has always been the image stabilization. For instance, with the A1, I had a lot of struggle hand-holding video and it was very shaky. Whereas now on this new Sony A9 Mark III, this is basically gone and it's super smooth and very similar to what Canon and even Nikon are offering at the moment. Another feature that I really enjoyed is the perfect implementation of the pre-capture on the A9 Mark III. You can set it anywhere from 0.3 second to 1 second, so you just get a few extra frames before you fully hit that shutter button. So how did I like the global shutter overall? I think it's a fantastic feature and it's great to have in a camera and see Sony pushing the boundaries with it. But at the same time, unless you're shooting sports where lots of balls are involved or golf club swinging, it's not necessarily something that you will really need or want. I think a lot of cameras like a Sony A1 for instance that has a super high readout speed and probably slightly better image quality might be the better option for a lot of people. So global shutter is fantastic, but at the moment I think the main application is a lot of sports photography, and that's what the A9 Mark III ultimately is, a great sports photography camera. So going forward I think we'll see more global shutters, but it's not going to be something that we'll probably find in every camera anytime soon. Since I was away so much, I didn't have a lot of time to edit any of my own photos, but I definitely had a good challenge trying to edit some of these sports photos that I was taking, because with birds and wildlife, I always like it to be quite contrasting, quite vibrant, but with these sports and people photos, I found some different editing styles work much better. And if you want to learn how to edit your own images, be more proficient, get the best results, and become more confident when it comes to image editing, I would highly recommend that you check out my pro sets, my masterclass, and my brush pack. With my pro sets, I allow you with just one click to get amazing raw transformations. In my masterclass, I teach you step by step everything you need to know in Photoshop. And with my brush pack, I make your life in Photoshop a lot easier. So if these are of interest to you, make sure to check them out down there in the description. Canon Rumors posted some interesting snippets from an interview with Canon at CP+. The most interesting bit was probably that Canon was saying that they can't say much, but they are working with third-party manufacturers to allow them to make RF mount lenses with autofocusing. And I assume one of these brands might be Sigma. However, it sounded like that Canon isn't really looking to create competition directly to their current lens lineup by offering cheaper third-party options, but rather they're looking at the third-party manufacturers to fill holes in the current lens lineup. So if I'm reading between the lines here, Canon is basically saying that they don't want any extra competition, but they would like other people to make lenses that they don't want to make themselves. Canon makes it also sound like that they're not actively working on putting a lot of global shutters into their cameras, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I said before that a global shutter is a very specialized product at the moment, and it has its great place for sports photography in particular, but for most other genres of photography, a super fast rolling shutter sensor might actually be a better option for now. There was also a strange bit of news this week, and that said that Canon is discontinuing the battery group, the BG-R10 for the R5, the R6 and the R6 Mark II. Now for the R5 that probably makes sense because later this year we will see an R5 Mark II and that will likely come with a new battery group as well, which means we have to shell out more money. But at the same time the current battery group was actually pretty terrible and the positioning especially of the joystick was awful on the grip, so I'm happy to see an update there. Another reason for the upgrade is likely that Canon will bring the multi-controller that we currently have on the R3 also to the R5 Mark II and the R1 later on. So the R5 Mark II, if it has a multi-controller, will definitely need a new battery group. The only thing I'm confused about is what happens with the R6 and the R6 Mark II. Is that not going to have a battery group anymore, or is the new group kind of backwards compatible with the older cameras? However, then it would be kind of strange to have different buttons on the battery group compared to the camera, wouldn't it? Have you guys gotten your Nikon 180 to 600mm zoom lens yet if you ordered one? I've read this article where it said that Page for the Video is only shipping orders from September 23 now, but I had assumed that kind of everyone who wanted that lens had already gotten one by now. Was I wrong on that? Nikon Rumors also posted an interesting interview by Photo Trend where they interviewed Nikon at the CP Plus event, and they also said a few interesting things. In particular, they were kind of gauging the interest of the consumer, whether they want another APS-C or /DX camera, and I think a lot of you guys would definitely say that you would love to see like a mirrorless version of a D500. At the moment, at least it sounds like that Nikon might be thinking about it, but they haven't fully convinced themselves yet that it's a good idea, but I think it would definitely be a good idea, wouldn't it? Nikon also said that they're more and more listening to direct customer feedback when it comes to their products and try to implement changes and firmware much quicker. And I mean, they've definitely proven to us already that they're very good at implementing changes in the firmware and also listening to what people want. And lastly, this might be something interesting for all of you that use third-party batteries. I'm not really someone who uses third-party batteries because I'm always a little bit dicey about them, because in the past I had problems with them, so I only use original manufacturer batteries at this stage. But Nikon actually stated that some of their cameras don't work with third-party batteries, and that is for safety reasons. I think it's also to protect the profits, of course, but at the same time I think with cheaper batteries in particular you might run into a lot of issues. So personally I definitely always stick to the original batteries just to be on the safe side. To finish off this video, I found this strange post by Sony Alpha Rumors where they posted a camera shop trying to sell a Sony Alpha 1 at a discount of $1,200. The only catch was though the camera couldn't autofocus. Would you get a camera like that for over $5,000? Pretty crazy. And with this great deal, I think it's time to wrap up this week's early bird photo news. So hit that like button, let me know your thoughts in the comments, check out my channel membership, and hit that subscribe button as well. And I will see you in another video very soon. Bye.